Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
My name is Gerard Sullivan, 32 years old, and I poured 15 years of my life into our family metal shop. 80-hour weeks were normal, my hands permanently calloused from building what I thought was my future. Then I found those transfer papers. My parents had secretly given everything to my brother. When Dad called panicking about losing our biggest client, I finally said what needed saying: let the air handle it. If you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. My story might just help you find your own strength. Sullivan Metal Works wasn't just a business. It was my inheritance, my identity, my future, or so I believed. My grandfather started it in a tiny garage back in the 70s, specializing in custom metal fabrication. Some of my earliest memories are the smell of hot metal and the rhythmic ping of hammer on steel. While other kids played video games, I spent weekends at the shop starting from age 10, mesmerized by the transformation of cold, hard metal into beautiful, functional art. My father, Thomas, was a stern man who spoke more through his craft than with words. He stood 6 feet tall with forearms like tree trunks, developed through decades of metalwork. His hands told stories, each callus. Each scar represented lessons learned and mastery earned. Dad never gave compliments easily. A slight nod was his highest praise, but that nod meant everything to me. I worked tirelessly to earn those rare gestures of approval. Mom, Diane, was the business brain behind our operation. While Dad and I focused on the metalwork, she managed the finances, client relationships, and paperwork. Her office at the back of the shop was immaculate, a stark contrast to the organized chaos of the workshop. She had a talent for numbers and negotiation that kept our family business profitable even when competitors failed. Then there was my brother, Jason. 5 years younger than me, he never showed interest in learning the trade. While I was getting burn scars and metal splinters, Jason was playing sports and later pursuing a business degree at State University. My parents seemed impressed by his presentations and business jargon. Jason understands the financial side, Mom would say proudly. I always thought his contribution would complement mine, his business knowledge and my craftsmanship forming a perfect partnership for the future. When I turned 17, college acceptance letters arrived, but I already knew my path. Dad, I want to join the business full-time, I announced over dinner one night. Mom looked concerned, but Dad's expression, a mixture of pride and relief, told me everything. College could teach me theory, but Dad could teach me a craft passed through generations. My apprenticeship was grueling. Dad showed no favoritism, quite the opposite. He was harder on me than any other worker, pushing me past breaking points, forcing perfection. If my son delivers subpar work, what message does that send? He'd growl when I complained. For 3 years, I was the first to arrive, last to leave, doing the hardest, dirtiest jobs without complaint. By 21, I could handle custom jobs independently. By 25, I was bringing innovations to the table, introducing computer-aided design to streamline certain processes, researching new alloys, and suggesting more efficient workflow patterns. Dad initially resisted these changes with his typical, "we've always done it this way" stance, but the results spoke for themselves. Production time decreased, quality improved, and profits increased. The recession of 2008 hit our industry hard. Several competitors closed shop, unable to weather the economic storm. But Sullivan Metal Works survived largely because of our reputation for taking on the challenging custom jobs others couldn't handle. I developed techniques for working with difficult metals and complex specifications that put us in a niche market with less competition. "No one does titanium fabrication like Sullivan" became a common phrase among industrial clients. Our reputation for quality and precision opened doors to high-end contracts, aerospace components, medical equipment parts, and custom architectural elements for luxury buildings. Through those lean years, I often worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. When we couldn't afford to keep all our staff, I learned to do their jobs too. Welder, designer, accountant, delivery driver, I wore every hat necessary. Dad's health began showing signs of strain. his hands developing an arthritic tremor that he tried to hide, but I noticed. Gradually, I took over the most physically demanding aspects of the business. "You have the touch, son," Dad said one evening as we locked up after a particularly grueling day. "Your grandfather would be proud." It was the closest thing to outright praise I'd ever received from him, and it fueled me through countless exhausting days afterward. During those years, Jason would occasionally visit from college, then later from his apartment in the city, where he worked entry-level positions at various corporate offices. He'd walk through the shop in pressed slacks and button-down shirts, asking questions about profit margins and market expansion, while being careful not to get dirt on his polished shoes. "You should see the case studies we're doing on family business succession," he mentioned during one holiday visit. "There are smart ways to transition ownership while minimizing tax burden." "That's good thinking," Mom replied, giving Dad a meaningful look. "We should discuss that more." I thought nothing of it then. I was too busy mastering my craft, building our business, and planning improvements that would carry Sullivan Metalworks into the future. The shop floor was my domain, and I assumed the business would naturally become mine when the time was right. After all, I was the one who had dedicated my life to it, who knew every client, every machine, every technique that made our work special. Looking back now, I should have paid more attention to those conversations happening behind closed doors. But I trusted my family implicitly. That trust would prove to be my blind spot. My daily routine became as hardened and predictable as the metals I worked with. The alarm would ring at 4:15 each morning. By 5, I'd be opening the shop, firing up the main furnace so it would reach optimal temperature by the time our workers arrived at 7. Those 2 hours of solitude were often my most productive sketching designs, preparing materials, or working on special projects without interruption. The physical toll was significant. My hands were permanently stained with metal dust that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Burns and cuts were so common, I stopped noticing new ones. Once, a sheet of steel slipped and sliced through my boot, requiring 15 stitches. I was back at work the next day, limping but determined not to fall behind schedule. "You need to take better care," Dad would say. Though his own body told the same story of sacrifice, hearing damaged from decades of industrial noise, a permanent hunch in his shoulders, scars mapping a lifetime of close calls. I missed countless social events, birthdays, and holidays because we were on deadline. 2 serious relationships ended because partners eventually tired of competing with the shop for my attention. "It's like you're married to that place," my last girlfriend said during our breakup. She wasn't wrong. Meanwhile, 3 different competitors tried to recruit me, offering substantial salary increases and normal working hours. "Thanks, but Sullivan is family," I'd tell them. "You can't put a price on that." Their offers usually ended with the same prediction: "When you're ready for appreciation instead of exploitation, call us." Despite the sacrifices, I found deep satisfaction in our accomplishments. We became known for taking on the impossible jobs, the ones requiring such precision and expertise that other shops wouldn't touch them. One such project led to our relationship with Precision Industries, which would become our largest client. Frank Donovan, Precision's founder and CEO, came to us after 3 other fabricators failed to meet his specifications for a custom medical equipment component. The tolerances were incredibly tight, the material difficult to work with, and the deadline seemingly impossible. "Everyone says it can't be done within these parameters," Frank said during our first meeting, his weathered face showing the skepticism of someone who'd been disappointed repeatedly. "Give me 72 hours with the blueprints," I replied. "If I say we can't do it, you've lost nothing but time." 3 days later, I presented Frank with a prototype that met every specification. The look of amazement on his face was worth the sleepless nights I'd spent perfecting it. "How did you manage this?" he asked, inspecting the piece with the precision tools he'd brought. "Proprietary technique," I smiled. "Family secret." From that day forward, Precision Industries became our anchor client, bringing steady, high-margin work that allowed us to be selective about other projects we took on. Frank specifically requested that I personally handle their orders, and we developed a friendship beyond business. He was a craftsman at heart, who had built his company on the same principles of quality and integrity that guided Sullivan Metalworks. "You remind me of myself 30 years ago," he told me once. "The difference is, I recognized when to delegate. You're going to burn yourself out taking on everything." He wasn't wrong. By my 30th birthday, I was essentially running daily operations while Dad took a more advisory role. Mom still handled the books, but I was managing client relationships, overseeing production, training new hires, and developing new techniques. On paper, I was still just an employee, but everyone in the industry knew Sullivan Metal Works thrived because of me. During this period, conversations about the future became more frequent. "You've really taken this place to new heights," Dad said during a rare dinner when we all made it home before 9. "Your grandfather would never believe what his little garage operation has become." "We need to start thinking about the next phase," Mom added. "Your father and I won't be doing this forever." "I've got plans," I assured them, excited to finally discuss succession. We could expand the fabrication area into the vacant lot next door, add a water jet cutter, take on more aerospace work. "Those are big investments," Jason commented. He'd been visiting more frequently, taking an interest in the business finances. "Have you run the numbers on ROI timelines?" "The returns would be substantial," I countered, pulling out the research I'd done. "We'd recoup costs within 18 months, based on the contracts I know we could secure." Dad and Mom exchanged looks across the table. "Let's not rush into anything," Dad said finally. "The business is stable now. That's what matters most for the future." I interpreted their caution as typical parental conservatism. What I didn't realize was they had already made decisions about the future decisions that didn't align with the vision I was sacrificing everything to build. In preparation for Sullivan Metal Works' 50th anniversary, I began a special project, a massive sculptural piece showcasing every technique and material we had mastered over the decades. I worked on it during off hours, pouring my heart into what I envisioned as both a tribute to our legacy and a bold statement about our future. The centerpiece featured 3 interlinked rings, symbolizing the 3 generations of Sullivan craftsmanship. "What do you think?" I asked Dad when I showed him the design plans. The finished piece could stand in front of the shop, a testament to what we've built together. He studied the plans silently, his expression unreadable. "It's good work," he finally said, placing a hand briefly on my shoulder before walking away. It wasn't the enthusiasm I'd hoped for, but I continued the project anyway, believing it represented something important about our shared legacy. I couldn't have imagined then that there was already a fracture in that legacy, one that would soon break my heart and change everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and my place in the world I had helped build. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday in April. I was working late as usual, finishing a rush order for a repeat client. Mom and Dad had left hours earlier for what they described as a dinner with old friends. The shop was quiet except for the steady rhythm of my work and the occasional ping of cooling metal. Around 9:30, I heard voices near the office, unusual for that hour. Thinking someone might have broken in, I grabbed a steel rod and moved silently toward the sound. Through the partially open door, I saw my parents and Jason sitting around Mom's desk, papers spread everywhere. "We need to transition the remaining accounts under the new structure," Jason was saying, sounding authoritative in a way that struck me as odd. "Gerard doesn't need to know all the details yet," Mom replied. "It would just complicate things while we're trying to secure the retirement plan." "He's going to ask questions eventually," Dad said, his voice weary. "Especially when the accountant needs his signature on the year-end documents. By then, everything will be settled," Jason assured them. "Trust me, this is the cleanest way to handle it." I backed away quietly, confusion clouding my thoughts. What new structure? What were they planning that involved my signature but not my knowledge? For the first time in my life, I felt like an outsider in my own family business. The next day, I arrived earlier than usual. The conversation had left me restless, and I wanted answers. Mom's office was always locked, but I knew where the spare key was hidden for emergencies. I justified my actions as protecting my future, the future I'd been promised through years of implicit understanding. Inside her meticulously organized filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled Ownership Transition 2021. My hands shook as I opened it. The documents inside were dense with legal terminology, but certain phrases jumped out with devastating clarity. Transfer of controlling interest, new ownership structure, Jason Sullivan named as primary shareholder and CEO. The dates on the papers showed the transfer had been completed 2 years ago. For 2 years, I had been working for a business that no longer recognized my contribution or my rightful place. I was still sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of betrayal, when Mom arrived an hour later. "Gerard, what are you doing in my office?" The alarm in her voice quickly turned to resignation when she saw the open folder on her desk. "You weren't supposed to find out this way." How was I supposed to find out? My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. After another decade of 80-hour weeks? At your retirement party when Jason takes the podium as owner? Dad and Jason arrived, while Mom was still struggling to explain. They found us in a standoff across her desk, the documents between us like a declaration of war. "You should have talked to us first," Dad said, his tone making it clear I was the one who had done something wrong by discovering their secret. "Talk? Like you talked to me before giving away my birthright?" The anger was building now, pushing through the initial shock. 15 years, Dad. 15 years I've put into this place, turning down better offers, sacrificing everything while Jason was off getting his fancy degree and working elsewhere. "That's exactly why this makes sense," Mom interjected. "Jason has the business education to take Sullivan Metalworks forward. You're brilliant with the craft, Gerard. But the modern business world requires different skills. Skills that apparently include going behind your brother's back." I shot back. Jason stepped forward, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "This isn't personal. It's business planning. Mom and Dad needed to secure their retirement, and this structure made the most financial sense for everyone. Everyone except me. You'll still have your job," Jason said in what I'm sure he thought was a reassuring tone. "Nothing changes day to day. You'll keep running the shop floor doing what you love, while you sit in an office, reaping the benefits of my work." The implications were becoming clearer by the second. "Have you been drawing a salary as owner all this time?" Their silence was confirmation enough. "So I've effectively been working for you? For free?" "We were going to discuss a proper compensation package," Mom said quickly, "once everything was settled. 2 years isn't enough time to settle things." The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. What else don't I know? Has Jason been making business decisions without telling me too? Another silence. Another confirmation. "We turned down the Westlake contract because Jason thought the margins were too thin," Dad finally admitted. "And the expansion you proposed last year was rejected because the new owner didn't approve," I finished, the pieces falling into place. "Even though I'm the one who brought in the clients that kept this place afloat. Even though I'm the one who modernized our techniques when you were ready to be left behind by the industry." "You're being emotional," Jason said dismissively. "This is why business decisions shouldn't be made based on sentiment." I looked at each of their faces, the people I trusted most in the world. Dad couldn't meet my eyes. Mom looked torn between guilt and defensiveness. Jason had the audacity to look annoyed, as if my reaction was an inconvenience to his plans. "I need some air," I said, walking out before I said something unforgivable. That night, I didn't sleep. The shock manifested physically. My stomach churned, my head pounded, and my hands, those hands that had built so much value for a business that wasn't mine, trembled with suppressed rage. 15 years of my life had been based on a lie. The future I thought I was building had been signed away without my knowledge or consent. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal, but the realization that my family didn't value my contribution. All those sacrifices, all that dedication, meant nothing compared to Jason's business degree and financial models. In their eyes, I was just labor, skilled labor perhaps, but not leadership material. By morning, something had hardened inside me. The pain was still there, but now it was encased in resolve. For the first time, I began to consider a future beyond Sullivan Metal Works, a future where my worth wasn't determined by people who had proven they couldn't be trusted to recognize it. The week following my discovery was the longest of my life. I continued showing up at the shop, mechanically going through motions that had once given me purpose and pride. Now each action felt like a betrayal of myself. Every piece I crafted added value to a business that had discarded my future. My family tried different approaches to manage the fallout. Dad acted as though nothing had changed, giving orders and discussing projects like any normal day. Mom made awkward attempts at reconciliation, bringing my favorite lunch to the shop and trying to engage me in conversations about moving forward together. Jason alternated between avoiding me entirely and making condescending remarks about bringing me up to speed on the business realities. None of them seemed to grasp the fundamental breach that had occurred. This wasn't just about ownership structure or titles. It was about 15 years of implied promises. It was about family loyalty and basic respect. I focused my remaining time on completing projects for clients who had trusted me personally with their work. Frank from Precision Industries had 3 specialized components waiting, and I refused to leave those obligations unfulfilled. "You seem different," Frank commented when he came to inspect the finished pieces. "Everything all right at Sullivan?" "Just some family business being worked out," I replied noncommittally. He gave me a searching look. "Family businesses can be complicated. If you ever need to talk, I've navigated those waters myself." I nodded gratefully, but said nothing more. I wasn't ready to discuss my plans with anyone, partly because I was still forming them myself. During lunch breaks, I began researching available workshop spaces for rent in the area. In the evenings, I cataloged my personal tools, the specialized implements I'd acquired over the years that belonged to me, not Sullivan Metalworks. I updated my resume for the first time since high school and reached out to former colleagues who had started their own ventures. On Friday morning, exactly 10 days after discovering the truth, I arrived at the shop earlier than usual. I methodically packed my personal tools into my truck, the specialized hammers and files I'd collected, the rare measuring instruments, the prototype designs that were mine alone. I left everything that rightfully belonged to the business, even items I had paid for myself but that had become integrated into the shop's workflow. Dad arrived as I was loading the last crate. "What's all this?" he asked, frowning at my truck. "I'm leaving," I said simply. His expression shifted from confusion to anger. "You can't just walk out. We have orders to fill, deadlines to meet. You have a new owner who can figure it out. This is ridiculous, Gerard. You're throwing a tantrum because your brother has a title? Nothing has changed about your role here." "Everything has changed, Dad. I'm not going to keep building value in a business that was taken from me." "Nothing was taken from you." His voice rose. "This was always our business to decide what to do with." That statement crystallized everything. In his mind, my 15 years of sweat equity meant nothing. I had never been a partner in his eyes, just an employee who happened to be his son. "You're right," I said quietly. "It was your decision, and now I'm making mine." Mom arrived during our confrontation, quickly grasping what was happening. "Gerard, please, let's discuss this rationally," she pleaded. "We can work out a new arrangement, maybe a profit-sharing plan, or—" "Too late for that," I interrupted. "You had years to discuss this rationally with me. You chose secrecy instead." Jason showed up last, immediately taking a combative stance. "You're just being emotional. Where do you think you'll go? No one in this town will hire you if you walk out on family." "I don't need anyone to hire me." The plan that had been forming in my mind suddenly solidified. "I've got 15 years of experience and a reputation of my own." "You signed a non-compete when you started full-time," Jason reminded me smugly. "Or did you forget that detail?" "I signed it with Sullivan Metalworks when Dad owned it," I countered. "The business transferred ownership. Check with your lawyers whether that contract transferred too." The uncertainty that flashed across his face told me he hadn't considered this angle. "This is your legacy too." Dad tried one last approach. "Your grandfather started this business. Are you really willing to turn your back on that?" "You turned your back on it first," I replied, "when you decided craft and dedication were worth less than a business degree." I closed my truck door and started the engine. I'll collect my final paycheck by mail. Driving away from Sullivan Metalworks that morning was the hardest and most liberating moment of my life. 15 years of certainty vanished, replaced by a terrifying yet exhilarating blank slate. My friend Sarah had offered her spare bedroom when I called the night before. "Stay as long as you need," she said when I arrived with my meager personal belongings. I always thought you were wasting your talent at your family's place anyway. The first few days of unemployment were strange. My body, conditioned to punishing physical work, felt restless with sudden inactivity. My mind, accustomed to constant problem-solving and creative challenges, turned inward, questioning every assumption I'd made about my life and future. Was I overreacting? Had I just destroyed my career out of pride? These doubts crept in during quiet moments, but each time I remembered the fundamental truth: I hadn't been valued. No matter what happened next, I couldn't go back to working under that knowledge. By the following Monday, I had begun to sketch plans for a small, independent operation. Nothing ambitious at first, just enough space and equipment to take on specialized projects. I would need to start small, build slowly, and live frugally until I established myself. For the first time in my adult life, I felt the terror and thrill of true independence. No family name to rely on, no established business infrastructure, no guaranteed paycheck, but also no ceiling on what I could create or how far I could go. The future I'd lost was replaced by one entirely of my own making. Sullivan Metalworks operated like a finely tuned machine, but it was a machine I had calibrated, maintained, and understood in ways no one else did. There were specialized jigs I'd created for particular projects, custom tool modifications, and techniques I'd developed through years of experimentation. None of these were documented in any manual. They lived in my hands and mind. The most complex project in progress when I left was for Precision Industries, a set of titanium components for a new medical device they were developing. The specifications required tolerances of less than 1/1000th of an inch, and the material needed specialized treatment to maintain its properties through the fabrication process. I had completed 3 of the 5 required components before leaving. 6 days after my departure, my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for another confrontation. His message was terse. "We need to talk. Call me back." I didn't. 3 more calls followed that day, each voicemail more urgent than the last. Finally, a text arrived. "Frank Donovan is threatening to pull all Precision business. Says he'll only work with you. We need to discuss options." A twinge of satisfaction cut through my lingering anger. Frank had always valued craftsmanship over corporate structure, and we'd developed a mutual respect over years of collaboration. Still, I wasn't ready to engage with my family on any terms. The next morning, Dad showed up at Sarah's apartment unannounced. "How did you find me?" I asked, not inviting him in. "Small town," he shrugged. "People talk. We need you to come back, at least temporarily." "Not going to happen." "Gerard, be reasonable. Precision represents 30% of our annual revenue. They're insisting you personally complete their current order, or they're walking." "Sounds like a problem for the owner to solve," I replied evenly. Dad's face flushed. "This affects all of us, including your mother's retirement security. You should have thought about that before signing everything over to Jason. It was a business decision, not a personal slight. Giving away what should have been mine after 15 years of building it up feels pretty personal from where I'm standing." Dad's expression hardened. "So that's it? You'll let the family business fail out of spite?" "The business is failing because you put someone in charge who doesn't understand what makes it valuable in the first place." I stepped back from the doorway. "Let the air handle it, Dad. That's what you chose him for." As I closed the door, I heard him call out, "This isn't finished, Gerard." He was right about that, at least. Over the next few days, the calls increased. Mom left tearful messages about responsibilities and family loyalty. Jason's calls oscillated between threats and awkward attempts at negotiation. "We could revisit the ownership structure," he offered in one message, sounding desperate. "Perhaps a minority stake would be appropriate given your technical contribution." Too little, too late. Through industry contacts, I learned the situation at Sullivan was deteriorating rapidly. 2 other major clients had pulled their business when they learned I was gone. The most skilled craftsmen on staff were struggling without my guidance on the specialized work. Orders were being delayed or completed below standard. Frank Donovan himself called me 10 days after I left Sullivan. "I don't know what happened between you and your family," he said bluntly, "and it's none of my business. But I need those components finished by someone I trust, and that's you. I appreciate the vote of confidence, Frank, but I don't have the equipment set up yet to handle that work. What would it take to get you there? He asked without hesitation. His question opened a door I hadn't expected so soon. Let me put together some numbers and get back to you, I replied, my mind already calculating possibilities. 2 weeks after my departure, Dad and Mom showed up together at Sarah's apartment. They looked exhausted, with new worry lines etched into their faces. We need to talk business, Dad said, his tone more conciliatory than before. The shop is in trouble. I let them in this time, offering coffee which they both accepted gratefully. Jason can't handle the technical aspects, Mom admitted, staring into her cup. The clients are losing confidence. We've had 3 order cancellations this week alone. What does Jason say about all this? I asked. He's suggesting we scale back to simpler projects and standard fabrication, Dad replied, unable to hide his disappointment. Abandon the custom work that built our reputation. That would kill everything that makes Sullivan special, I observed. We know, Mom said quietly. That's why we're here. We're prepared to offer you a 25% ownership stake to come back. I nearly laughed. You're offering me a minority share in what should have been mine? After I've proven how essential I am to its survival? 40%, Dad countered quickly. And a seat on the board. The board? Since when does our small family shop have a board? Jason established a proper corporate structure, Mom explained. It's actually been quite beneficial for tax purposes. I shook my head. Not interested. What will it take, Gerard? Dad asked, frustration evident in his voice. Name your terms. I looked at them, both the people who had raised me, taught me a craft, and then betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible. 51%, I said finally. Controlling interest or nothing. Dad's face darkened. That's not possible. We've already established the succession plan with Jason, then I guess we have nothing more to discuss. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. I wish you luck. You're going to need it. As they left, Mom turned back with tears in her eyes. This isn't what we wanted, Gerard. We never meant to lose you. Sometimes the consequences of our choices aren't what we expect, I replied. That doesn't make them any less real. After they left, I sat for a long while thinking about legacy, family, and value. Sullivan Metal Works had been my whole world for so long that even now, betrayed and angry, I felt the pull of responsibility toward it. But something had shifted inside me, a fundamental realignment of priorities. For the first time, I was putting my own worth first. The next day, I signed a lease on a small workshop space across town. It wasn't much, just enough room for basic equipment and a small office area, but it was mine. The first step toward something new. Starting over at 32 wasn't in my life plan. I'd never imagined building from scratch what I thought I already had a future in metalworking, a business to call my own, a legacy to build upon. But here I was, standing in an empty rented garage, with nothing but my personal tools and 15 years of hard-earned knowledge. The space was far from ideal. Poor ventilation, outdated electrical system, concrete floor cracked from years of neglect. But the rent was affordable, the location accessible, and most importantly, it was mine. No family politics, no hidden agendas, no decisions made behind my back. Frank Donovan visited 2 days after I signed the lease. He walked around the empty space, hands clasped behind his back, nodding thoughtfully. It's going to take a lot of work, he observed. I'm not afraid of that, I replied. No, you never have been. He turned to face me directly. Here's my proposal. Precision Industries will advance you payment for the remaining components we need, enough to cover equipment costs. In return, we get priority service for the next year and preferred pricing. Frank, that's good business, he interrupted. I'm not doing you a charity. I need those components done right, and you're the only one I trust to deliver them. This arrangement benefits us both. I considered his offer carefully. It wasn't a handout, it was an investment based on my proven skills. I accept, I said, extending my hand. You won't regret it. I know I won't, he replied, shaking firmly. I've been watching you work for years, Gerard. Sullivan Metal Works was riding on your talent, not the other way around. With Frank's advance, I purchased essential equipment, a used foundry furnace, a decent metal lathe, basic cutting and welding tools. Nothing fancy, but enough to start producing high-quality custom work. I worked 18-hour days setting up the shop, figuring out workflows designed for one person instead of a team, and completing Frank's components in the evenings. When I delivered the finished pieces to Precision Industries, Frank inspected them with his usual meticulous attention to detail. "Perfect," he pronounced after thorough measurements. "Even better than the first batch. I took some extra time with the finish," I explained. "New equipment gave me a chance to refine the process." "What are you calling this operation of yours?" he asked. I hadn't given it much thought, focused as I was on the practical aspects of getting established. "I haven't decided yet." "You should. Word's getting around about you going independent. People are asking who to call, where to find you." That conversation led to my first official business decision, naming my new venture Forged Integrity Metalworks. It captured both the physical craft and the personal values that had led me to this point. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit manufacturing community. Within a month, I had more orders than I could handle alone, mostly from former Sullivan clients who had followed news of my departure with interest. I found myself in the unexpected position of needing to hire help much sooner than anticipated. Marcus Jensen was 19, fresh out of technical school with raw talent, but no real-world experience. When he walked into my shop asking for apprenticeship, I recognized the same hunger for the craft that had driven me at his age. "I can't pay much to start," I warned him. "I'm here to learn," he replied. "The money will come when I've earned it." Taking him on meant I could accept more projects, but it also meant I was now responsible for someone else's livelihood. I thought carefully about how to treat him, about the kind of mentor I wanted to be versus the one I'd had. First rule, I told Marcus on his first day, "We work hard, but we work smart. No unnecessary overtime, no sacrificing quality for speed, and no working while exhausted. That's how mistakes happen." "But what if we fall behind schedule?" he asked, clearly accustomed to different expectations. "Then we adjust the schedule or have an honest conversation with the client. Our reputation depends on quality and integrity, not just meeting arbitrary deadlines." This philosophy, so different from the pressure cooker environment I'd come from, became the foundation of Forged Integrity's culture. We worked diligently, but sustainably. I shared knowledge freely, instead of hoarding it as a source of power. We celebrated wins together and treated failures as learning opportunities rather than personal failings. 3 months after opening, I secured a small business loan with Arthur Williams at First Community Bank. His father had been one of my grandfather's first customers, and that connection, along with my growing portfolio of successful independent projects, helped overcome the usual hurdles for a new business. "Your business plan is solid," Arthur said after reviewing my projections. "But what really sells me is your reputation. Everyone in town knows you were the real talent behind Sullivan's success in recent years." The loan allowed me to move from the garage to a proper commercial space, a former auto body shop with good bones and ample room for expansion. With help from Marcus and several weekend volunteers, former colleagues who supported my new venture, we transformed it into a functional metalworking shop with designated areas for different processes, proper ventilation, and even a small client meeting space. Denise Foster, the real estate agent who helped me find the property, became another unexpected ally. "My husband had Sullivan do some custom work for his construction business last year," she explained. "He said the quality dropped dramatically after you left. He'll be calling you for the next project." 6 months into my new venture, I encountered Jason at our main supplier's warehouse. I was placing a substantial order of specialty metals when he walked in. The moment of recognition was awkward for us, both me now representing a competing business, him clearly struggling with Sullivan's reduced circumstances. His appearance told the story his pride would never admit. The polished businessman look had faded, replaced by the haggard expression of someone drowning in problems he didn't understand how to solve. His formerly immaculate clothes were wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Gerard," he acknowledged stiffly. "Jason," I returned with a nod. "I see you're doing well," he said, gesturing to my large order. "Can't complain. How are things at Sullivan?" A flash of anger crossed his face. We're making necessary adjustments to market realities. Translation: the business was failing. If you need any technical advice, my door is open, I offered. Not from malice, but from genuine concern for the legacy my grandfather had built. We're handling it, he snapped before walking away. Later that week, Victor Ramirez, my main supplier, confirmed what Jason wouldn't admit. Sullivan's credit is on watch status, he confided. They've missed 2 payment deadlines and scaled back orders by 60%. Word is they're trying to sell the building. The news should have felt like vindication, but instead, it left me with a complicated sadness. Sullivan Metalworks represented 3 generations of craftsmanship and dedication. Watching it decline wasn't the victory I might have imagined during those first angry days after discovering the betrayal. That evening, I sat in my new office, looking at an old photograph of my grandfather standing proudly in front of the original Sullivan shop. He'd built something meaningful from nothing but skill and determination, exactly what I was now trying to do myself. The path had changed, but the legacy of craftsmanship continued through my hands rather than through the family business. For the first time since striking out on my own, I felt a sense of peace about my decision. I wasn't just running away from betrayal. I was running towards something better, something built on a foundation of respect, integrity, and genuine value. My worth wasn't determined by my family's recognition, but by the quality of my work and the strength of my character. As Forged Integrity Metalworks grew, so did my confidence in this new path. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had actually been the beginning of something I never knew. I needed the chance to define success on my own terms. 1 year after walking away from Sullivan Metalworks, Forged Integrity had grown from a one-man operation in a rented garage to a thriving business with 5 employees, a solid client base, and a reputation for exceptional quality. The journey hadn't been easy. There were sleepless nights worrying about making payroll, technical challenges with limited equipment, and the emotional weight of family estrangement. Healing from family betrayal proved more difficult than building a business. The anger that initially fueled my departure gradually transformed into a dull ache of disappointment and loss. I missed the easy camaraderie I once shared with Dad over a challenging project. I missed Mom's proud smile when clients praised our work. I even missed arguing with Jason about business decisions, back when I thought we were on the same team. Through it all, I learned to separate my self-worth from others' validation. Each satisfied client, each perfectly executed project, each employee who thrived under my mentorship reinforced what I now knew with certainty. My value wasn't defined by my family's recognition. Marcus, once a raw apprentice, had developed into a skilled craftsman with innovative ideas of his own. "You've taught me more in 1 year than 4 years of technical school," he told me one day as we completed a particularly challenging project. Not just about metalwork, but about doing business with integrity. His words meant more than he could know. Breaking the cycle of exploitation disguised as tough love had become as important to me as creating quality metalwork. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, almost exactly 13 months after I left Sullivan, my father appeared at the front desk of Forged Integrity. Amanda, our office manager, buzzed me on the intercom. "Your father is here to see you," she said cautiously, aware of our complicated history. I took a deep breath before responding. "Send him back." Dad looked older than when I'd last seen him, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. He stood awkwardly in my office doorway, taking in the space I'd created without him. "Nice setup you have here," he offered finally. "Thanks. What brings you by, Dad?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Sullivan Metalworks is closing. We're selling the building next month." Though I'd heard rumors, the confirmation hit harder than expected. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you?" His tone wasn't accusatory, just tired. "Of course I am. It's Grandpa's legacy. It's where I learned everything." He nodded slowly. "That's part of why I'm here. I wanted you to hear it from me, not through the grapevine." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit down. Would you like some coffee?" The familiar ritual of sharing coffee created a momentary bridge across the chasm between us. As Dad sipped from his mug, I noticed his hand still strong but trembling slightly. Whether from age or emotion, I couldn't tell. "What happened?" I asked finally. What you predicted, he admitted. Without your expertise, we couldn't maintain the quality or efficiency. Clients left. Costs rose. Jason tried. I'll give him that, but he didn't understand the craft. No, and I was too proud to admit we'd made a mistake. He set down his cup. I should have recognized what you brought to the business, Gerard. Your grandfather would be disappointed in how I handled things. The admission I'd once craved now brought little satisfaction. We all made mistakes. I could have pushed harder for recognition, instead of assuming my contribution was seen. Your mother and I thought we were securing our retirement, Dad continued. Jason had all these plans for modernizing the business model, expanding into areas we'd never considered. It seemed like the sensible choice at the time. And now? Now we're selling the building to cover debts and salvage what we can for retirement. Jason's taking a job with a management consulting firm in the city. He looked around my workshop again. Meanwhile, you've built all this in a year. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The son they'd deemed unsuitable to lead the family business had created a thriving enterprise from scratch, while their chosen successor had presided over its collapse. What will you do after the sale? I asked. Dad's shoulders slumped slightly. That's actually my second reason for coming. I need work, Gerard. Not charity, but honest work. I still have skills to offer, even if my judgment in other areas was flawed. The request surprised me. You want to work here? For me? If you'll have me. As an employee, not a partner. His pride was clearly struggling with this reversal of roles. I understand if that's not something you're willing to consider. I considered his request carefully. Working alongside Dad again would be complicated. Old dynamics don't disappear overnight. But I also recognized the opportunity for healing this represented. I could use another experienced craftsman, I said finally, especially someone who could mentor the younger staff. But it would be on my terms, Dad. This is my business. Run my way. I understand, he nodded. I've seen what you've built here. You clearly know what you're doing. We spent the next hour discussing practical details: salary, responsibilities, start date. The conversation was more businessman to businessman than father to son, but perhaps that's what we needed. Clear boundaries, mutual respect, explicit rather than implied expectations. Mom visited separately a week later. While Dad had come seeking employment, she came seeking reconciliation. I didn't handle things well, she admitted tearfully during our conversation. We should have included you in the discussions about succession. We should have valued your contribution more openly. Why didn't you? I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. She considered carefully before answering. I think we got caught up in appearances. Jason talked like the business leaders we admired. He had credentials, presentations, 5-year plans. You just did the work. Brilliantly, but quietly. We mistook his polish for capability. Her honesty was refreshing after months of justifications and excuses. I'm not asking for anything, she continued, just hoping we can start rebuilding our relationship. I've missed you, Gerard. I've missed you too, Mom. And I had. Family relationships are complex. They can be simultaneously the source of our deepest wounds and our most profound connections. Healing wouldn't happen overnight, but this honest conversation was a start. Jason and I crossed paths at Dad's 70th birthday dinner a month later. A small, subdued celebration at my parents' house. His corporate job was taking him out of state the following week. Your shop seems to be doing well, he offered stiffly during a moment alone. It is, I confirmed. How's the consulting position? Different, challenging in its own way. He hesitated before adding, I may have underestimated what it takes to run a hands-on business. It was as close to an admission of error as I was likely to get from Jason. Different businesses need different skills, I replied neutrally. You'll probably excel at consulting. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the truce we were establishing. We would never be close, but we could be civil for our parents' sake. As months passed, Dad found his place at Forged Integrity, not as an authority figure but as a valued craftsman and mentor. The younger employees respected his technical knowledge, while I handled the business decisions. It wasn't always smooth. but we were learning a new way to work together based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The lessons from this painful chapter of my life weren't what I might have expected. I learned that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to something better. I learned that true value comes from within, from integrity, skill, and dedication, not from others' recognition. Most importantly, I learned that while betrayal leaves scars, it doesn't have to define your future. Today, Forged Integrity Metalwork stands as testament to these lessons. We create pieces that will last generations, built on a foundation of honesty and excellence. I no longer work 80-hour weeks. I've learned that sustainable success requires balance. I make time for friendships, hobbies, and occasionally even dating, all the aspects of life I once sacrificed for a future that wasn't mine. The betrayal that once seemed like the end of my world became the beginning of something authentic and truly mine. Sometimes the most valuable things we create aren't forged in metal, but in the choices we make when facing life's greatest challenges. If my story resonates with you, I'd love to hear about a time when disappointment led you to something better than you'd planned. Leave a comment below about your own experience with unexpected new beginnings. And if you found value in my journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need encouragement to trust their worth even when others don't recognize it. Thank you for listening, and remember, the strongest metals are forged through fire.